All right, so it wasn't good, but it was good enough to win. And now the Washington Commanders have their first winning record since 2015 and an 85% chance of securing their spot in the Lombardi Trophy tournament. That and more coming up on today's Victory Monday episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome inside this live Victory Monday episode of Locked On Commanders, coming to you from the surface of the Caesars Superdome, where the Washington Commanders just got done beating the New Orleans Saints 20-19. Not a great win, but a win nonetheless. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. Appreciate you coming through. You can also find me helping out with WSA9.com's local coverage of the team. Thank you again for coming through for today's episode. Everydayers, thank you for coming through every single day. Of course, Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. If you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode. We're going to talk about Terry McLaurin being the number one star in a very close, very drama-filled win for the Washington Commanders. We're also going to talk about how they took control early and then held on to the end of this game. But we're going to kick it all off with the Washington Commanders advancing to 9-5. And we're going to do so thanks to FanDuel, where new customers, you can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So the Washington Commanders win 20-19. At the end of the day, that is the final score. That is the most important part of this entire thing. They now have an 85% chance of securing an NFL playoff spot. That it's very good. That's exactly what you want. And they've secured their first winning season with 9 wins. Worst they can do is 9-8, and they have not finished above 500 since 2015. So there's a lot of good in there. And I preface that because we all know, if you watch the game, if you haven't watched the game and you're just here to get my insight and to get my opinion, I'm going to tell you right now, there's certainly a lot of things that still need to be worked on. But the good news is you're talking about a 9-win team that has a lot of area to improve so you can get even better. Now, the offense is where we're going to start with this thing, because the offense continues to not fully take advantage of their opportunities. We're going to talk a little bit more about this as well in the next segment, but right off the bat, kind of giving you my first take following this game. That is, I think, the biggest takeaway here for the offensive side of the ball is they're not taking advantage of their opportunities. They continue to not take advantage of their opportunities. And I actually am the one who I had some conversations with some insiders during the first half of the game, and not all insiders, but some, and I'm sure that there are other Commanders fans who kind of echoed the same sentiment. We're a little frustrated to see this Washington Commanders team not be able to put up more than 14 points against a 5-8 New Orleans Saints team. Now, what I told insiders at halftime was be a little bit careful with saying this is a 5-8 team. This is a team that you should come in and handle easily, a la the Dallas Cowboys a few weeks ago, which, of course, that was one of the any given Sunday type of games, right? But this is a team, and I think a lot of those memories from that Cowboys team kind of came back a little bit. But the thing that I reminded insiders about was this New Orleans Saints team this season giving up an average of 22.6 points per game overall. Now, that includes, in that average, a 40-point game that they gave up to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the Buccaneers actually scored about 50-something, but there was a defensive touchdown, extra points, and things like that don't necessarily go against the defense, right? So the defense gave up about 40 points. So even with that 40-point outburst in 1 week, the overall season average for the Saints defense is 22.6 points per game. So I said 14 points is ahead of that schedule. So you're happy with that. However, this team then comes out and they score in their first 2 drives of the second half, which is good, but they're both field goals, and miss a bunch of opportunities to put more points up on the board later on in the game. There's ends up being a missed field goal as well. And when you get down to the bottom of it, the New Orleans Saints, even though they lose, their defense's points scored against them average is actually going to improve because they failed, the Washington Commanders did, to score even that 22.6 points, which obviously you'd have to score 23 to go above and beyond that. And when you talk about this Washington Commanders team, and there is still this element of they're better than we thought they would be, that certainly is still there. However, if this team is better than we thought they would be, which they are, they also should be able to come out. And if you're an above average team, you should be able to, in theory, score more than the opposing team's average that they're giving up. So while at halftime, I was speaking the voice of caution and reason, say, hey, 14 points, you're on pace to score 28. That's about a touchdown more than they're giving up all season long. That's not a bad first half. However, now we look at the second half, the totality of the game, You come in 2.6 points below that season average that the Saints have been giving up all season long. You want to be an above average team. You need to go out there and put up at least 23 points on this team, if not more. And yes, Jayden Daniels and the offense certainly put this team in position to score those 23 points. But let's be honest, you don't want to barely be above average for a team that is about to not play playoff football. You want to be talking about the 27, 28 point range against a team like that. So the offense continues to not take advantage of those opportunities. Penalties costing them late in the game. I actually am a little disoriented. I'm not really sure where the press box is from here, so I don't know if it's this end of the field or the other end of the field, but around the 10-yard line, De'Ami Brown brings in a really big pass from Jayden Daniels, puts them in prime scoring position, potentially going to put up a touchdown that's going to essentially end this game, and there's a penalty. Calls that play back, and it wasn't the first time we had a play called back on the Washington Commanders offense due to a penalty, due to a mistake. And look, some of the players talked about, they understood this officiating staff that was here today was a little bit nitpicky. I'm sure if you were watching the game at home, I can tell you right now that some of us here in the stadium were certainly like, bro, come on, like let these guys play. You don't need to make all these calls and make this game more about you than it needs to be. But at the end of the day, you know what I mean? You know this officiating crew is going to be a little bit nitpicky. You got to be kind of on your P's and Q's. That penalty can't cost you that type of opportunity. Plus, then there's some opportunities. There's 3 missed touchdown passes to Terry McLaurin. And this isn't just on Jayden Daniels, but they do all look like, well, 2 look like overthrows. 1 looks like an underthrow, but they missed on those connections, and that's a connection that's been really solid. And today, look, overall, it was solid as well. Terry McLaurin gets 2 touchdowns, continues to set career highs in touchdowns. Jayden Daniels throws his 16th and 17th touchdown passes of his young NFL career. So it's not like the entire game obviously was disjointed, but if you connect on even one of those passes, then it's 27-19. That's if the New Orleans Saints still pull out those late game, quote unquote, heroics. It's not even a close competition at that point. If you get even one of them, let alone 2 of them, and those 3 missed shots, 2 of those shots came on 1 drive, you end up with a missed field goal on that drive. The first missed shot in the second half ends up with a punt on that drive. So those are drives that should have produced touchdowns, end up not producing anything. Now, that's the offensive side of the ball, but let's not pretend this is just on the offense. Late game defense continues to falter. And in some of the past games, Pittsburgh Steelers, right, it was like, hey, look, Benjamin St-Juste had a really dumb mistake, really bad mistake. He owned it. It's not on the entire unit. It's on that kind of one guy, and it still was. But the Philadelphia Eagles, it was a fatigue thing. Dallas Cowboys, even, it was a little bit of a fatigue thing, right? You were on the field too long. The Washington Commanders held the ball in this game for nearly 41 minutes. Total time of possession, Washington Commanders, 40 minutes and 50 seconds. New Orleans Saints, 19 minutes and 10 seconds. The New Orleans Saints didn't even hold the ball for a quarter and a half of this game. So there's no fatigue being set in. Okay, so the Washington Commanders defense, players are being asked about it. They're owning up to it. The coach, Joe Jr., has owned up to it. But there's got to come a moment where the rubber meets the road and you figure it out, and you got to get this thing figured out, because you've got to be able to play 60 minutes of defensive football, or else this playoff berth that you're trying to secure so heavily is going to go by the wayside. And really, at the end of the day, will all be for naught. So some offensive deficiencies, some defensive deficiencies. Again, the great news is first winning record since 2015, 85% chance of making the playoffs. And this team, so many people are frustrated with on every different level, can still get a lot better. In some ways, that's good news. Because they won, we're going to spin it as good news on this Victory Monday. We're also going to take a look back at our 3 must-dos and some other news and notes from the Washington Commanders' 2019 win over the New Orleans Saints. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Built Rewards. And if you're a renter, then you need to listen up, because this is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments, just like you do with your groceries, your travel, and so many other things. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. Earn valuable Built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. Redeem those points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in the program, the possibilities are endless, and you can access unique experiences that are exclusive to Built Rewards members. I love using points for travel, and Built makes it so easy to turn your rent into rewards. If you're already paying rent, why not make it work for you? So start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure you use our link so they know we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. Continue now with today's Victory Monday episode of Locked On Commanders and David Harrison. Thank you for joining me here. We're going to go over the 3 must-dos that we outlined before this game this week, and we're going to talk about all of the things that the Washington Commanders should have done to completely dismantle the New Orleans Saints. And unfortunately, obviously, they did not do all of those things. And folks, we're going to do that thanks in part to our friends over at BetterHelp. With BetterHelp, in today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp, if I can speak English for a living. Talk about our favorite parts of the holiday here. I don't like the cold winter weather. I don't like the cold snaps. I'm a warm weather person. That's what I always prefer to do. That's what I would always prefer to do. But you can't always have those things, and you can't always get what you want from every season, and you have to deal with it. What I do like, however, is the scenery. You drive around the country, and you drive through your hometowns, and you drive through all these areas, and you have all this beautiful weather. It makes me feel reinvigorated. It makes me feel really good about what I'm seeing around me. And those are the types of things that I steer into. So even when I'm having a bad day, those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for. And sometimes you also need to look for other people that can help you find the good around you when you're not feeling so hot. So if you're thinking that you need that and you need to start therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. And you can do that by finding your comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon, BetterHelp.com/lockedon. We're also doing this live Victory Monday episode thanks to the TNT College Football Playoffs. It's time of year. The College Football Playoff is back, and the newly expanded 12-team format is guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying action you love from college football. TNT Sports coverage of College Football Playoffs begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. And of course, the Texas Longhorns and Clemson Tigers are fighting it off for a right to see or to face my Arizona State Sun Devils. So again, make sure you're tuning in for all of that coming up here this college football season. Moving on in today's episode, looking at the 3 things that the Washington Commanders needed to do in order to get this victory over the New Orleans Saints. We wanted them to establish the run. We wanted them to score early, and we needed them to harass the quarterback. And I would say that they did 2 of those 3 things. They did 3 of those 3 things, to be completely honest with you. What they failed to do was continue some of the momentum that 2 of those 3 things did, and they weren't able to necessarily complete the other part of this. So establishing the run, Brian Robinson Jr., we talked about the options for the Washington Commanders to replace Noah Brown, and one of those was certainly getting even more use out of Brian Robinson Jr. I had mentioned hoping that maybe the team would be able to develop a multi-lead score and really kind of have the momentum in their hands so that they could maybe rest Brian Robinson a little bit and then lean on Chris Rodriguez. At the end of the day, Chris Rodriguez Jr. only gets 1 carry for 2 yards. He's just going to kind of be that player for us, I think, this year, because I know a lot of insiders are also wanting to see him get a little bit more burn. He's going to be that guy that we see all the potential in, and for whatever reason, just can't get on the field consistently. Jeremy McNichols, 2 carries for 4 yards. Brian Robinson Jr., 21 carries, 65 yards. He averaged 3.1 yards per carry. And we talked about this before. When Brian Robinson Jr. averages 4 yards per carry or more, the Washington Commanders are undefeated. When he averages less than 4 yards per carry, they actually had a losing record. Now they have a 3-3 record, so they're 500 at least. But Jayden Daniels also coming in, 11 carries for 66 yards. He had a 24-yarder. Brian Robinson had a 20-yarder that originally was deemed a pass by the National Football League, but eventually they reversed that and turned that into a run. So Brian Robinson gets credit for that 20-yard run instead of a pass play. So did they establish the run? Yeah, they certainly tried to ride. They certainly used it quite often. Were they dominant in it? No. So you kind of get partial credit, I think, for that assignment here when you're looking at that. Scoring early. The Saints didn't score in their first 5 possessions. We talked about this during the 3-game losing streak. The Steelers didn't score in their first 5. The Eagles didn't score in their first 6, and the Cowboys didn't score in their first 7. Today, the New Orleans Saints didn't score in their first 5 possessions. The Washington Commanders, in that same stretch, put up 14 points. So in that sense, we actually talked about it earlier this week. I even said to you guys, if they can score 2 touchdowns before halftime, it's going to put them in a really good position to get a win against the New Orleans Saints. Well, guess what? They scored 2 touchdowns before halftime. They put them in a really good position to win this game. The problem, again, what we just talked about, the offense could not continue taking advantage of opportunities. They end up letting the Saints hang around, not only hang around, but get all the way back into it to where they're basically one play away from getting the win. And yes, I know the clock stopped, shouldn't have stopped, gave the Saints more time. There is a theory argument that maybe they would have run out of time had the clock not stopped. It is what it is. At the end of the day, it happened. There's nothing they can do to change that now. Just look at it, and hopefully the NFL is going to talk to some of these people and say, hey, look, make sure we're out here doing the right thing. Number 3 was harass the quarterback. I talked about trying to get like 3 sacks, 6 sacks on this New Orleans Saints quarterback, Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler, combination of the two, whoever it was going to be. In order to do so, you're going to have to create about 12, 13 quarterback pressures. Well, the Washington Commanders end up creating 13 total pressures, 10 times hitting the opposing quarterback, getting 3 sacks. Not great, right? If that's the assignment, I think you're probably going to get about a C on this thing, but they did create a lot of havoc there. So I think you give them a little bit, at least a partial credit. So I don't know. I think in total, we come away with they achieved like 2.25 of the 3 must-dos, and obviously they end up coming away with the win. Some other notes that I wanted to talk about here in this post-game episode, this Victory Monday episode, lots of new things that we saw today from the Washington Commanders. Perhaps it was the absence of Noah Brown. Perhaps it's the continuing evolution of Cliff Kingsbury and just this team, this coaching staff. But first and foremost thing that we noticed, Terry McLaurin moving around the field a lot more, lined up on the right side, lined up on the left side. It was actually interesting. Very first play of the game for the Washington Commanders offense, the question all week has been, who's going to be that number 2 receiver? Well, when the Washington Commanders came out for their very first offensive play of the game, there was no 2 receivers. There was just Terry McLaurin. It was Terry McLaurin only, and he was lined up on the right side. So it was kind of a little bit of, and I don't think Cliff Kingsbury did this on purpose, but it was kind of funny because, like, okay, we're all looking for who this number 2 receiver is going to be, and you come out the very first play with just 1 receiver. Then Terry McLaurin goes over to his usual left side. Dyami Brown lined up split wide right. I think at the end of the day, Dyami Brown comes up with most of those split wide right reps where Noah Brown usually was. But we noticed Terry McLaurin motioning from the left to right, from the right to left, running more of his routes parallel to the line of scrimmage, which is something we've been asking about, being able to turn his numbers towards the quarterback more than he had before. So you like seeing all those wrinkles from the Washington Commanders and from Cliff Kingsbury's offense. You also see Brian Robinson Jr. getting more involved in the passing game. Didn't set a season high in receptions, but he did match his season high in receptions, added 3 catches for 22 yards to his 21 rushes for 65 yards. So you like seeing that. That was also something we kind of talked about, where the Washington Commanders might go that direction to replace Noah Brown. We also saw Marshon Lattimore defensively flipping over to that side of the notes. Saw Marshon Lattimore on the field for the first time. The Saints saw him as well, but they stayed away from him, which is essentially what you would expect. And talking to Saints media members here in New Orleans, they all said most of the games you watch Marshon Lattimore play, that's what it is you don't really notice him because the opposing offense is not going after him. And because of that, he isn't going to get the chance to make plays. I actually had a text at one point from one of the insiders who said, is Marshon Lattimore even playing? I said, yes, he's absolutely playing. The Saints are staying away from him, which he knew they would do. Everybody else kind of knew he would do. Next week against the Philadelphia Eagles, you can probably expect Marshon to get a little bit more burn. You also have the arrival, I would say, of Benjamin St-Juste. Obviously did not get a lot of play in this game with Marshon Lattimore coming in. As we projected, it was Marshon Lattimore, Mikey Sainristil, Noah Igbenogany. Those were your 3 primary cornerbacks. Benjamin St-Juste ends up going to the bench. Did get in here and there, but you're going to remember him mostly for a penalty, hands to the face, came on a 3rd and 10 play. The New Orleans Saints quarterback was sacked. Spencer Rattler got sacked on the play, but because of Benjamin St-Juste, illegal hands to the face penalty, he ends up keeping that drive alive for New Orleans. They end up scoring, helps kind of contribute to what happened at the end of this game, and that, of course, is not what you want to do if you're Benjamin St-Juste. Another penalty there on the defensive side. Something else of note, Carl Davis was called up again. No Fedarian Mathis, again, a healthy scratch. So this conversation we had a couple weeks ago of, is Fedarian in the doghouse? You know, look, Dan Quinn was asked a very similar question, but he said, no, it's more about competition, and Carl Davis really deserved it. Now I think the questions are definitely going to turn more towards, hey, look, what is Fedarian not doing that you need him to do in order to continue to get playing time? And we'll see how that works out next week against the Philadelphia Eagles. Finally, to wrap up today's episode, we're going to talk about our play of the day, and we're also going to talk about our 3 stars of the game here on this Victory Monday episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that thanks in part to our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to take on all the NFL action every weekend throughout the rest of the regular season into the playoffs with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers, if you bet $5 on FanDuel, you'll get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets on the NFL in games, before games, after your favorite game, and then going up against Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, whatever is to come. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you think a player is going to do something or a game is going to go a certain way, you can check out the latest stats, view the play-by-play, and so much more in the exact same place where you can place your bets right there on FanDuel. So download the app or go to FanDuel.com to sign up today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Again, Victory Monday. Thank you for joining us here live from the service of St-Juste Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana, where the Washington Commanders just completed their 9th win of the season. Again, not a pretty win, but a win nonetheless. When you look at the play of the day, and there's a lot of options here, but I think you got to go to the very end of the game. You got to go to the 2-point conversion, because that's the ultimate got to have it moment, right? If you're the New Orleans Saints and you get it, you win the game. If you're the Washington Commanders and they don't get it, you win the game, and that is how this game ends up coming to a head. Talked to Frankie Louvu, Washington Commanders linebacker, after the game about that sprint out play the New Orleans Saints drew up, and he said he was kind of surprised that that's the way that they went, because you essentially take away half to even 2/3 of your own field playing service when you run a play like that. And basically, it's one of those plays that's either going to work right away or it's not going to work at all. He actually said he expected them to do something a little bit more like what they did on the touchdown that ended up leading to the 2-point conversion try. So I think while it's not going to be the sexiest highlight play of the game and all that stuff, and obviously the big explosive plays that we saw, especially in the second half, only one explosive play between the two teams in the first half at all, the 29-yard pass to Alvin Kamara. In the second half, you end up with about 5 or 6 combined explosive plays between the two teams. So those are going to be sexier, but obviously the way that this game went down, that final 2-point conversion play is the biggest play of the game. Moving now into our 3 stars of the game. And if you're a football fan only and you don't watch any hockey, you may not understand how we're doing this, but in the NHL, they do 3 stars of every game. 3rd star is your last star, 2nd star is your second, your 1st star is your top star. And that's how we're going to do this too. Star number 3 is going to be a guy that didn't have any stats, really, didn't get a lot of attention. Probably didn't hear his name much outside the beginning of the game. And that is Marshon Lattimore. I talked to Marshon in the locker room after the game. I said, bro, it's like they knew they shouldn't go near you. And he said, bro, you know they know, because this is New Orleans. Like, this is where he dominated so many other opponents. This is where he made his name as a Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber cornerback in the National Football League. So, of course, the New Orleans Saints are going to show him a lot of respect. And that's pretty much how this whole thing went down. So not a lot of production, not a lot of highlight plays for Marshon Lattimore in this game. No, I think it was at one point in time, he had played 30-something snaps and had no targets against him. That is what you should expect from most teams during the season. Now, next week against Philadelphia Eagles, I don't know. They're a little bit more bold. They have a little bit more talent. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith out there. The New Orleans Saints obviously coming in here shorthanded across the board. A lot of injuries to the New Orleans Saints this season, so they didn't have the boldness to go after him. Star number 2 is going to be Brian Robinson. We talked about all the carries, the reception, matching his season high in catches. And B-Rob, not just there, but there was a specific blitz pickup where Jayden Daniels was able to get the ball out cleanly for a big 3rd down conversion because Brian Robinson Jr. stood in there. I mean, it wasn't the most beautiful blitz pickup ever, but, man, he stood in there. He took a lot of punishment on that blitz pickup, and he made sure his quarterback had the opportunity. It wasn't the only time he did that, but it was probably the biggest time, the most notable. I got multiple texts. I'm sending texts to insiders talking about that blitz pickup at the same time. I'm getting texts from insiders about that blitz pickup. So that is our moment right there. And then finally, Terry McLaurin, he's going to be our star number 1. Not only did he come away with 7 catches on 10 targets for 73 yards and 2 touchdowns, but again, should have had 2 more, probably would have eclipsed, I don't know, 200, 100, at least 150 yards, if not more. So Terry McLaurin winning all day against his matchups. New Orleans Saints really just could not figure out an answer to stop him. So Terry McLaurin, our number 1 star. That's going to wrap up our Victory Monday live episode here of Locked On Commanders. I appreciate you coming through. I'm going to fly back to the DMV tomorrow morning, drive straight to Ashburn to go do the Dan Quinn interview for WSA9. And at some point Monday night, we're going to come back here and we're going to do another episode of Locked On Commanders, dive a little bit more into this game, what went down, how it all happened. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is text me. To do that, all you got to do is sign up to become an insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders today. Become a Locked On Commanders insider. And for your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. It's all new, and it's twice a day. Thanks for coming through to talk about Victory Monday here on Locked On Commanders. And until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.